Good evening. My name is Christian Sorensen. I'm a Democratic Party of Evanston board member, and I'm here tonight with Donna Wang, a candidate for the District 65 school board.
My name is Donna Wang, and I use she, her, hers, AF pronouns. So first of all, I do want to thank DPOE and all of you for this opportunity. And I do know that many of us are dealing with Zoom fatigue. I was born in Evanston as a child of two immigrant parents, second generation APITA, Asian Pacific Islander Desi American, raised in the Midwest, moved to SoCal, middle of freshman year of high school. I still don't recommend that. And then I returned to Chicago to work in corporate finance and then eventually moved into higher ed. My husband and I moved to Evanston in 2006. We have two children, one at Chute Middle School and another at Walker Elementary. And I often say that I'm a Jill of many trades. As professionally, I serve as the associate director at Northwestern University's Farley Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And then I also taught as an adjunct lecturer last spring for a class on personal finance and accounting for the gig economy. Let's see, for our community, I've served in many different capacities. I've served on the city's MWEBE committee for minority women Evanston-based enterprises, small businesses, to housing and community, to coaching AYSO soccer, to Bessie Rhodes and Walker PTA. And then actually for the last 3 years, I've served on PTA council as treasurer, vice president, and now president. So right now, this district, our district 65, is at a pivotal time under new leadership. And I think that I can bring my experience of change management, but also my different perspectives as an education staff administrator, teacher, student, and as a parent to the team of school board.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Donna. Unsurprisingly, our first couple of questions are going to focus on the pandemic and the District 65 response. The District 65 has put a program in place to provide technological assistance to students who did not have what they need for remote learning. Do you believe that these accommodations provided have been adequate? And what changes, if any, would you like to see made to these programs?
It's a great question. I do think that when everything happened in the spring, we all thought that this was going to be done and over with in a couple of weeks. So, there were Chromebooks that were being issued and Wi-Fi, but I can't help but think, growing up my freshman year of high school, I shared my family. There was 4 of us and my mom, and we had a 2-bedroom apartment. And I remember doing homework standing up on the kitchen counter. So, not just the technology, but just having that, what's the word I'm looking for? Just being able to have that space to do any kind of e-learning or homework. I can't imagine trying to e-learn in that little 2-bedroom apartment with all of my siblings and my mother. So I think there's that. I do think that the district did make significant efforts, especially in the fall, with rolling out with the Chromebooks and the iPads for everyone. So things were a little bit more equitable. I will say that I really appreciated our teachers and our principal at Walker Elementary, because in the spring, my daughter was using my phone for a while to even attend her e-learning, and he said that there was an extra Chromebook and dropped one off at our doorstep the very next day. So I do think that there's better things that we could continue doing, but I do think what they've done so far, at least with the technology piece, has been to the best of their ability. And I also think what the PTA Equity Project has done with raising monies to ensure that there was more iPads to be purchased for students was also a step in the right direction.
Okay, excellent. Now with a move to, potential move to a hybrid format in the coming months,
sure.
What steps do you believe the board should take specifically to ensure that students on one learning pathway are not falling behind those on a different pathway?
So as I mentioned, I have multiple children, and each child will learn a little differently than the other. I do think that there are so many different populations of our students that we need to focus on. There is the equity piece. There is ensuring that students have different resources to them. But I also can't help but think of our TWE population. Bilingual education, learning that online has to be so difficult and isolating. We also have the population with IEP. I think what the school board can do is perhaps I think there's several things we could do. I think first we can listen to parents, see what is going well potentially, what could be better, and what needs more support. And I think another thing is we need to also collaborate and learn from others. What are other cities doing? Why are we trying to start from scratch? What else is happening outside of Evanston, Skokie?
Okay. What criteria do you think should be used when evaluating the plan as the school year progresses? What comes to mind?
Right. Well, I do think that the current standards that they have around equity, you know, I think they said like if you fell under McKinney-Vento, the homelessness, if you were under free and reduced lunch, I think obviously the younger age group, um, I think those are really important things. I also think there needs to be another priority put on IEP and our TWE population. I do know mental health is a very strong issue that many of us are facing, both adults and children and our students. So
No, that's okay.
yeah,
That's a full answer. Absolutely. Yeah. So how would you, starting your board term this
mhm,
spring,
sure.
if you're elected, how would you address that disparity in the fall between economically or racially disadvantaged students in the district, and
Sure.
those in those privileged households? What do you see as what you can do?
So one of the main reasons I decided to apply for school board is that I view it truly as a team effort and bringing out each other's strengths. I think that what I bring to the school board team is being able to keep an eye on equity, being a part of, PEP and then other efforts. I think that being able to look at things, I think when we look at how are we going to finance this return to school, you know, we can't just keep increasing our spend. There will need to be cuts. But at the same time, also looking at what are areas for revenue too in supporting our students. So I think that where I would play best in a role would be partially in the change management process, but also looking at things from a financial standpoint, while also supporting the equity and the other things that the district has made a priority in the past several years.
Okay, excellent. We're going to move away from the pandemic for a second. Several years ago, District 65 passed a funding referendum,
Mm-hmm.
a referendum that DPOE endorsed and campaigned for.
Right.
We'd like to hear your thoughts on the current state of the District 65 budget, current future priorities.
Sure.
We're an organization that has a number of elected officials who believe that budgets are moral documents. So what do you see as the biggest financial challenge faced by the district, and what actions would you like to see the board take to address the projected deficits?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I taught a personal finance class and I love my acronyms. So, with my students, we did BYOB with Donna, which was build your own budget. And I always tell them to stay full. You got to follow up, update, live and learn. A budget's not solid. It has to be constantly changing. One thing I have noticed over the last several years, especially since the referendum, is our expenses have increased 6%, and yet our revenue has only increased 2%. So those two aren't matching up. So either we need to decrease our spending or we need to increase our revenue in other ways besides increasing property taxes for everyone. I do think that this is the perfect timing with Dr. Horton taking the reins for us really to look at where does our district stand, and I think that being able to return to school, we can really look at the different learning pathways and metrics that we're using and how to standardize them. But also I also believe that we should really use the collective purchasing power too. One of the things I realized when I was treasurer PTA council about 3 years back is I asked a simple question: how much are people paying for school supplies? And if you can believe this, across the board, there was no one same answer, and it came from, we were at Bessie Rhodes and then we transferred to Walker. And even that was different prices, for students and then students on free and reduced lunch. And then even where schools were getting their supplies, teachers. It wasn't even the same process. And that really surprised me. So I took all of that information, put it into a presentation, and shared that. And I think that when you really look at things from a different light, you realize, why are we spending so much time and money doing these one-off things? You know, we should be really using that collective power, partially for that group discount, but also because it just saves on efforts and money and finances.
Sure. Donna, really quickly,
Sure.
this is a question for me. I'm hearing your responses.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned alternative revenue twice, and it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like maybe you have some ideas. I'd love to give you some space to expound on that. Revenue
Sure.
outside the property. Yeah.
Um, One thing that I have presented in the past was the idea. I think that if we do go the route of supporting the Fifth Ward School, I know that there's that STEM school that's in process. I have definitely been in support of that. I believe that could be a wonderful ground to really use as a teaching resource, maybe for student teachers there. I think that's something that we could use with higher education, having them support having this um, teaching school right there in their background, especially focused around STEM. And I think with STEM, you're also looking at specific grants that could be used for this. I think that there's definitely different partnerships that could help with increasing revenue as well too.
Okay. Wonderful. Do you feel that the general budget process at District 65 is transparent and accessible to parents of students, to the community at large? What, if any, changes would you like to see made to the budget process?
Sure. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because we actually have our PTA council, the monthly one tomorrow, where we've invited Raphael from the district to come and talk about the budget process, because the thought process is a new one, and we want to learn a little bit more in the transparency. You know, what is going to happen with all this information, all of these thoughts? How is it going to affect the budget and finance process? And I believe that there should be a bit of transparency. I don't want us to get caught up in the weeds either, with parents looking through line by line and questioning contracts. I know that that is a very lengthy process in itself, but I do believe that there needs to be better explanation and just a holistic overview. So I would like to see more transparency there.
Here's a question from one of our DPOE members who has a student in the District 65 schools.
Mhm.
As Democrats, we believe in a commitment to racial justice and equity.
Right.
What have you done to center students who are part of historically marginalized communities?
Sure. So I believe that I am still somewhat between chapter 3 and 4 of my equity journey. You know, I've dealt with racism, sexism, ageism, growing up, working in computer science, finance, and even higher education. It still actually drives me nuts when I introduce myself as Donna Sue, and people are like, Donna Sue, what's your last name? And I have to be like, it's Sue, which is why the Wang is in the middle. But I would actually say my equity journey started at Northwestern, and it was working there. I actually learned about our Evanston Black community from some of my colleagues who lived in the Fifth Ward. That led to me joining the MWEB committee. My second child, her home daycare was in the Fifth Ward. Both of them attended Fleetwood Jourdain. So that really brought so much awareness to me. And it was also at Northwestern that I participated in the LGBTQI allyship training and change makers. And then I've participated too in the Listening to Black Students academic advising, staff affinity group for APITA members, a mental health ally. But then even within District 65, I've been part of a seed cohort, and then of course involved with PEP through PTA Council. My kids will tell you that I always say, well done is better than well said. And I think that with this pandemic, one of the things I believe that is truly equitable is about the availability to enrichment. You know, can you afford that or not? So this past year, alongside another District 65 parent, you know, we've been busy ensuring that we have the scholarship dollars and making enrichment available to all. I think that we have definitely some concerns when we look at the achievement gaps between our Black students and Brown students, and even our TWE students too.
Okay, excellent. There, so we have a number. I know we touched on the idea of a Fifth Award STEM school. We have a number of DPOE members who would like to see District 65 reopen a school in the Fifth Ward. People who attended the school on the site, where
Right.
it is now. So, what do you have anything else that you'd like to say on the idea and speak to those members
Sure.
and their concerns?
One thing I definitely noticed in looking at the achievement gaps, especially for our Black students, was the numbers of those that were meeting the gaps, that were meeting sorry, words are failing me right now, that were meeting expectations were the ones from Walker and Oakton. And I can't help but notice that those are also the neighborhood schools. The ones that the gap was the highest would be the schools that our Fifth Ward children are being bused out to. So I think that's also a telling factor. I do support that, but I also understand previous administration had hesitated due to funding reasons. But I also can't help but notice when you look at the reports, the class numbers are so drastic. I think that something needs to be done where you have classes maybe at one school where a second grade class will have 11 kids per class. And then, across the district, you have another second grade class of 24 kids in that classroom. That's an equity issue. And you've got to wonder, what is the racial breakdown there and how much attention are they going to be getting from that teacher?
Yeah. Okay. Why District 65? Of all the ways to get involved in public service, of all of the races on the ballot this cycle, why District 65?
I have loved being on PTA council. And when I say love, it's like how I love my children. Things can be challenging, it can be tough, but I have really seen community being built and people are open and free enough to disagree publicly with each other, and still do it in a respectful manner. And I've really enjoyed the kind of community that's been built up. But I think same thing, for example, the school supplies, I discovered that 3 years ago, and, all this leadership, the PTA leadership, we felt, okay, something needs to be done. And I really appreciate that, I think SUNY, Kartha, and Biz had shared that they were able to make it happen for this academic year, but it still took time. And I think that what the current board members have done is a really great initiatives. I want to maintain that quality. And I think right now, what I bring to it is I'm a doer and I'm a planner. So we have all these great initiatives. We're at the pivotal point. I want to start setting out that timeline and that budget, and that's where I shine. So that's why D65. And there's so much of my life that's part of education that it just made sense to be part of this right now. And like I said, I view it as a team and I'm ready to participate.
Well, you scooped my next question again. Right. It was that there are 3 incumbents that you're running against, and what's a decision they've made that you agree with? Sure. Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to mind that we're encouraging?
So to be transparent, I've worked with Sula at Northwestern. She was part of my Changemakers cohort number 5. So, she and I have definitely talked about issues at District 65, and I did coach Joey Halpern's son in basketball. And so I do think some of the things that they have done that I have agreed with, I think with, I think the curriculum, definitely pushing Equity Week curriculum was a really big thing. And then also with the Black Lives Matter, same thing with the school supplies. I was very much in agreement with that. I think that with the PEP initiatives, I think that's also been something I've strongly agreed with and supported. I think that, the eye on equity has been very important. And that's definitely something that this board has strongly really brought to our attention. And I think that we've gotten the ideas and the buy-in, and I think what's next is going to be the focus on the teaching and the learning and the metrics and how are we going to measure that. So for the most part, I would say I'm in agreement with many of the things that the board has done.
My next question is just specific to your situation. We are the Democratic Party of Evanston, and it looks like you might have a history of voting in Republican primaries. So now that we may not have interacted with you knocking on your door, so what is it? Why should we as Democrats cross the aisle?
Sure. So I'm currently running on this as an independent platform. I have voted Democratic president for the last, I don't know, since 2004. My husband and I, he's a registered Democrat and I'm not. We have a tendency to debate topics and we like to focus on the platforms of each person. And, I am not a party voter. If anything, I've joined, a Republican Women, used to be for Hillary and now it's for Progress. And the reason I think that I haven't given it up is because in the past it was trying to vote for the best candidate that wasn't Trump, to try to usurp him. And I think that's one of my reasons. I think for me, instead of just being a party voter all the way down, I like to look at each person and really dive into the platform, what they stand for, their history. I think their history, like I said, what you do is more than what you say you might do or want to do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So what is your, to wrap up, what
Sure.
is your, I always say this at work, priority is a singular term.
Right.
So what is your number one priority for this upcoming term? And what specifically would it take to make that happen?
I think my priority would be a safe return to school. And I think working together with both the district members and also listening and working with the teachers, ensuring safety, health. I think that there's a number of factors that would need to make that happen. But I do think that would be a number one priority starting this term, a safe return to school and take what we learned there and apply that to the fall. Just because the vaccine will be out, we can't guarantee that all of our teachers, families, administrators, and then a child vaccine hasn't even been approved yet too. So that's another concern too. So I think, yeah, safe return to school and just all of the different metrics that we're going to be looking at as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's everything I've got.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, we did take a little bit. Obviously, I have a couple of submissions for District 65 from members, but this would be the community portion, and unfortunately, we're going to have to cut that out for now. But what we're going to do is at the forum, we're going to try to find a way to provide some avenues for potential constituent response. The point of this, again, we wanted to make it feel like if we were having these at our office, people could just walk in. We weren't going to put anybody's name on any lists, because that's always everyone's concern when you sign up for something with the Democratic Party is like, oh, I'm going to get 5,000 fundraising emails. So we were trying to avoid that, but I think in the interest of safety here and with emotions running high everywhere, we're going to have to be very careful and thoughtful in how we do this. But we will definitely provide the opportunity for some community feedback. And yeah, thank you so much for your time tonight. And I hope you, I hope you still get the chance to kick your feet up tonight.
Thank you. And thank you for